Welcome to the Soul Patch Podcast, the podcast where three American expats explore different topics related to living and working in South Korea. With a combined 50 years of living experience in Asia, there are plenty of stories to tell. So, pop in your AirPods and make yourself comfortable. It's time for the Soul Patch Podcast.
When you guys first came here and you first got into a taxi, what was your impression of the taxi?
Well, I'll in Korea, I had already been living in Thailand when I came to
Fair
Korea.
point.
So I came
Yeah.
from a place but I was in a taxi once in Thailand, and I think there's some parallels here. That guy, we hit a truck and he just took off and started
Really?
going even faster. Yeah. So we're on the freeway. And I was young and invincible at that point. I can't die. I couldn't die. That was
Of
my
course.
kind of mentality, right? So one friend was like just shaking and putting his seatbelt on. Another friend and we were laughing. We think it's hilarious as we're just weaving in and out of traffic. And we hit a truck. And then instead of stopping and dealing with it, the taxi driver just went even faster and just took off. And by the grace of God, we got to the bus station and we didn't die. And I don't know, there were no cameras in taxis back then that I don't think.
Yeah, right.
This is 20 years ago. Then when I came to Korea, that aggressive taxi driver thing I was already kind of used to it. I was just like, okay, they're gonna bob and weave in and out of traffic and slalom through the freeway, and you kind of like it because you're getting a better deal. Like you're looking at the
It's
meter.
getting you where you need to go fast.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. So
yeah, I was
what about you
really.
guys? Were you
I mean,
shocked?
it was surprising. Of course, it was just like, holy crap! This taxi driver is just like flying through and like going through red lights and stuff like that, and just driving insanely. Like you said, the going through traffic was nuts. And then of course, I did go abroad to like China and Vietnam, and was like, oh, Koreans are a bit more tame than here. But
right.
yeah, it was just watching the traffic here when I first came in, as like watching how the locals do it. And granted, taxi drivers are a different style of driver to some extent, but it was just like, this is crazy. They're race car drivers through the streets.
Yeah.
And the thing that stood out to me, coming from the last city I lived in, which was Chicago, and when I came here was Busan, was where they would put the pedal down. I think there's a lot more of the, what do you call it? The CCTV, the police cam, like awareness here. So like when they kind of know where there's no police cam, you don't really see a lot of like traffic stops, pullovers, that kind of thing.
Which we'll talk about
So
in a bit,
in Busan, what's that?
we'll get to that definitely. Cops on the road, traffic stops.
Yeah, it's a different kind of system in a lot of ways, with pros and cons. But I noticed the drivers, when they get onto the bridges, they would just fly. I mean, going across the Wanli Bridge, like it's just like, yeah, it was really, really surprising. It was like, but I think it's because there's less risk of them getting stopped, and you kind of see everybody kind of guns it, but the taxis, they take the lead. I don't know.
The bridges are true. There's no exits or entrances on bridges, and so it's generally less congestion. When it's open, it's just gonna fly. So it's safe to assume.
Even 20 years ago, they had speed cameras, placed in certain areas. But now you can download an app, which I have. It's called Kakao Navi. It's a navigation.
Well, you don't have to download any, like every navigation app tells you where the cameras are.
Oh yeah, right. That's true.
Like,
I guess I've only used I only had an older one, and then when I switched to Kakao Navi, I never looked. I never had another navigation system. So
I prefer Naver actually on my phone. But
do they? Oh, Naver has, okay. Well,
the
all
Naver
of
maps,
these apps will tell you,
like, there's a bunch of them.
They'll start warning you like when you get close to. So I know that that system. Now everybody knows where all the traffic lights are, unless a cop has set up a specific speed trap on that particular day, which I've seen. I got nailed on.
Oh, have you?
I got hit. Yeah. And that was the only time where I was, I had seen that. I hadn't seen that
Yeah, I
anywhere
always
else.
find those when I first saw them years ago. I was in a car with somebody else was driving, and we were driving down to Busan actually, and I remember him speeding up and slowing down. He was using his old navigation. It wasn't even on. I don't think it was on a smartphone. I think it was just like a GPS device. This was like a decade ago, and I just remember being shocked that they would be that you knew where the traffic camera was going to be, right? Like you
It
just
seems
drive
like
and
cheating to me. I was like, why,
Yeah.
why are they allowed to cheat? You know, it's like,
right, like
you
you know
shouldn't-
exactly where it
you
is.
shouldn't be allowed to know where, where these, where these are or whatever. Was my thinking, was like, it's supposed to be random, right?
Right, yeah. Coming from the States, you're always used to like, there could be a cop anywhere, right, on the side, and you'll have cars kind of like flashing their lights from the other side to maybe let people know that there's a cop coming, or that kind of like
Yeah.
information. But there's no like, oh, actually, I think there are apps now where people actually put it in. But
In the old
again, I
days,
don't
it
know.
used to be like truck drivers. You had to have like a, what do you call those? Like a
Oh
CB
yeah,
radio or
CB.
something, like breaker,
Yep.
there's a,
Smoky up ahead.
Yeah. I was gonna say
Yeah, that's
something
right.
else, but yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, having it in the app just surprised me. And it's just a way like when then everyone drives, they're going 100, 120, and then suddenly it's like boom down to 80 or whatever the speed limit is. And then the second you pass it by, right, it's counting it down in your app, and it's like, you've got 100 meters, and then bling, it makes a noise after you pass, and then boom, back up to 100, back up to 120.
Well, let me ask you guys, when did you first start driving? Like, how long did you live here before you were behind the wheel of a car? Before you decided to get your driver's license and stuff.
I had a motorcycle the second when I came back to Korea. The first year I drove bikes, but illegally. I didn't have like any type of license. It was explained to me by friends just not to worry about it. Like if a police officer pulls you over, they probably don't want to hassle a foreigner. It was kind of like,
yeah.
Not that you should play that card ever,
Yeah.
but
I know exactly what you mean.
I just believed what other people told me, and I didn't use a bike often. But then when I came back, a friend had abandoned a rather nice bike, and so I used that for a little while. And then the only times I drive is just when I rent a car. I've never owned a car here, and I got licensed briefly, and I've driven since. Again, without a proper license, but only like, not like an emergency, but
How did you get licensed briefly but didn't keep it?
What's that?
How did you get?
I had a tourist license at AAA.
Oh, the international driver's license, not an actual Korean driver.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I never did the Korean license.
Oh, I did the Korean license where I had to surrender my driver's license from America.
Same.
And they gave me, so they still have mine on file somewhere, and so I have a proper driver's license. I did that when my wife was not my wife, when she was my girlfriend. She got a car and went to a driving academy which is really common here, like for Koreans to learn how to drive, because there's really like no, I'm from the suburbs of St. Paul, White Bear Lake, Minnesota. It just sounds like there's tons of parking lots to practice driving in. You know what I mean?
Right, your dad just takes you out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the story, right? Like my dad took me out to a parking lot, and he's like, here, I'll show you how to drive around. Eventually I learned how to drive manual transmission, which is like a rite of passage for a lot of men, I guess. But fewer and fewer people know how to drive manuals these days anyway. But beside that,
at least in the States, that's not true in Europe. In Europe, still,
true. Yeah. But my wife, went to school, got her driver's license, and then she when we got married, we wanted to both be able to use that car. And so, but I was loath to drive here. I was kind of just very happy with public transportation, and just looking at the roads, is like, do I want to even be involved in this aspect of the, do I want to even do this? It's awful. But I felt kind of putting all the pressure on her to drive me everywhere. She became the taxi driver, and she's a new driver, and I've been driving for, at that point, since I was 16 years old. So it just seemed like, okay, you got to man up and get your driver's license. I think maybe the thing holding me back was probably just the bureaucracy of waiting in line at the place, just going through the whole day.
Easy.
Yeah, it wasn't actually that bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I got my license a bunch of years ago here in Korea, but I actually got it because not because I wanted to drive in Korea. I didn't want to drive in Korea. I still don't want to drive in Korea. Mass transit here is amazing. But I actually got it because I wanted to get my international license to go on a trip, to be able to use it when I was, traveling in Europe or something. I wanted to be able to rent a car there. But it was easier for me to get my international license through my Korean license than to ship back my American one and have to go through AAA and stuff like that to get my American international license. So, because getting an international license, Jack, if you ever need it, it's super easy. You just go into a police station. They're like, boom, like $6, and you walk out with it.
Fantastic.
If you have your Korean license and you want to drive in a country not America, it's crazy easy to get your Korean international license.
Oh, that's a good tip for our listeners out there then.
Super easy.
Okay.
Yeah, just walk
go
into
to
a police station.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the big proper police stations, not like one of the little like corner ones, but like a big proper police station. Just take your license in and be like, I want an international license. You might have to take a picture. I think you do. And then it's like less than $10. It's less than Manwon, and then you're in and out in 20 minutes. It's crazy quick. But then I started driving when we still don't own a car of our own, but my brother-in-law has a car, and we pretty much have access to it because he doesn't drive to work ever. He takes the transit. He just has a card for when he needs it. And so when he's not using it, if we need it for shopping or whatever, then I just borrow his. And I've been driving quite a bit in the past year or so, and I still don't like it. That's probably, if we want to talk about things that I don't like about Korea, driving is probably just about top of the list.
Oh man,
I do not enjoy driving here.
Well, let me ask.
I really like driving. I like when I get the chance to, but for me, it's like when I rent a car. So it's if I'm doing something, like I'm in Jeju, I'm going on holiday or something.
And Jeju is different than Seoul.
Exactly. And it's also either way, even if I rent a car here in Seoul, which has been a long time since I ever have, it's fun for me to drive because I love driving, but I don't want that to be part of my regular weekly life. That's not the way to go for me. When the transit system here in taxis, it's so nice. But on the other hand, my girlfriend, she loves driving, and she's also a very good driver. I feel very, very comfortable and that's something to observe in a place where there is manic traffic.
My wife is the same. Driver. She's very zen. Yeah, it's
and likes to drive. I like to be the passenger. So we got a good thing worked out there for when we want to use the car typically these days. But yeah, on a regular basis, for me, it's not so much the traffic, it's the parking hassle. It's absurd in most situations if you're in the city. Yeah. Like you're just better off by the time you find a parking spot, by the time you pay for the parking spot, all told, it's just like, man, why didn't you just take the train? You can pop out pretty much anywhere 50 feet from your destination.
Yeah.
And you can, listen to music or watch a YouTube video on your way. Like, yeah, it's just really.
And I think we're kind of having two different conversations a little bit. Like you're talking about Seoul, which I would like 100,000% agree with you that.
That's true.
I know a lot of people do have cars in Seoul, but like parking, just driving through, I've been stuck in Seoul traffic where for 2 hours to go 5 kilometers, on like a Christmas Eve trying to get my wife and my daughter to this performance at Seoul Arts Center. And I swear we hit this area on the freeway called Yangjae exit, Yangjae station. And between there and the Seoul Arts Center, I could have.
It's near Gangnam.
I could have walked. If they'd have just gotten out of the car on the freeway and just started walking, they would have gotten there faster than it took me to drive them there. And it was 5 kilometers away. Those are the moments where you just want to harikari yourself.
There's times and places for sure. Like this is a while ago. It was over a year ago, but I needed to get down to the Apple store in Garosugil. So that's kind of for listeners that don't know, that area is, I don't know what you compare it to, hip area. It's where all the expensive shops are. It's nice. I like it. It's fun to hang out.
Hipster town.
What's that?
Hipster town.
Yeah, it's a bit like the hipster town.
Where is and this? This is Gangnam, Apgujeong area? You talking about?
Apgujeong, yeah, like
okay. Near Apgujeong.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's so Garosugil on that street, that's like the main drag. It's the one big Apple store that's in Korea. There's other retailers you can find here everywhere, but that's like the Apple store for right now, as far as I know. And I needed to go there to, it was something with my, not relative to the story, but it was an issue. I needed to talk to a technician. So it's going to take an undefined amount of time that I'm going to be there. It's like I was working with like a logic board on my laptop, went to crap, I had to get it replaced. So I'm in a car going there. There's no parking in this part of town. If a parking spot there costs more than my house.
Well,
like,
you'll see Ferraris there. I mean, I saw Ferrari on that street. Like
many.
Yeah, like, I mean, we're talking about like the Beverly Hills of Korea, basically.
Yeah,
kind of, yeah.
Yeah, so my girlfriend gave me a lift. There's absolutely no place you're gonna park. And she's like, okay, I have to jump out. And she's just circling the neighborhood.
Oh, really? The whole time?
Yeah, just driving around, waiting for my text.
Oh, boy.
You know?
Yeah.
That's just what you do. And that's what we do right now if we went down there.
Well, and for me, it's different because I live in Gyeonggi, so I'm in the suburbs of Seoul, and so things are more more spacious out here. Things are farther apart. A trip to the grocery store, if I were to go get on the bus, and then it's going to take me so much longer than just hopping in my car, even going to school. So I rationalize having a car it's kind of a necessity, the same way living in the suburbs in the United States would be. Like, it's just, you kind of have to have one to just function. It's just so much more convenient. In Seoul, I don't think it's the cost benefit, analysis. At the end of the day, it's not worth it necessarily to have the car. It's better to just,
well, that's where a lot of people, like my brother-in-law, like they have a car for weekends and for when you need it, but then during the week they still commute on the subway and things like that.
Yeah.
So
if I lived in Seoul, I would do that.
Yeah, there's no way driving to work every day is a good idea.
I guess that's what I meant when I said that I wouldn't want it to be part of my regular weekly life. So I could see owning a car here, and the longer that I stay here, the more likely it comes that I'll probably buy a car. But it would not be for going to campus. It wouldn't be for like daily stuff, shopping, this kind of thing. It'd be for the weekend. It'd be for fun. I'd have it minimally insured. I wouldn't put a lot of money into the vehicle. It'd be like just this thing.
These days, even for that, Ryan, there's a lot of car rental services now that I don't think, like, it's nice. I'm glad that my brother-in-law has a car. It makes it very easy when we need to drive to the vet, which is on the other side of town, or when we're doing a Costco run, because then we're buying a bunch of shit and we have to load it in the trunk. But there's even a few years ago, I remember talking to one of our coworkers who was telling me that you could rent a car for a weekend trip, just for like 2 or 3 days, and it was like $30 a day or something like that. And now there's another
rentals are cheap.
Yeah, the rentals are cheap for that. But then there's new things now. There's probably a couple brands, but the only one that I know of offhand is called SoCar. And that one, you can rent a car by the hour, basically. So there's just an app on your phone. You're just like, I just want to pick up a car from here to here, and you pay based on mileage and based on how it is. But if you want just to literally do what you're saying, like I need to go to the store and do some shopping and then go home. Like, renting is way better than having to pay for maintenance and all of that bullshit.
And parking too, if you don't have a parking spot.
Yeah, actually, for a lot of those SoCar things, like they have their own parking areas. So you would pick it up at the parking area in your neighborhood and then drop it off at the parking area. It's like those scooters on the road, not quite as convenient, but they can go across town. So yeah, renting is almost better than owning in some cases.
Here, next to the house, there's actually a small private parking lot. It's not covered. I think that was $150 a month.
No.
So that's pretty good for the city, but $150 a month. And then we moved it to a different area that actually is covered. It doesn't have a garage or anything. It's just like the carport, underneath like a building.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So you're exposed to the elements and everything, but you're not going to get, no rain on your head. I think that one, we had to have moved there because it's cheaper, but I thought, I don't know, maybe about the same, but we have to walk then to get to the car. You're walking, it's like 4 blocks. So it's like, it's like, and when you're in a city that's dense, like most of the things you need when you want to just go out, they're within 4 blocks. So
you've already passed 3 places that sells the thing you're driving your car to get, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, we could just skip the car and just go to the market here instead of going to that market. And
I mean,
Diminishing.
it's just I would equate it to like living in New York City. I mean, it's really the same thing,
Yeah.
right? It's like,
I
you know,
see,
you
yeah.
can, a lot of people in New York own cars, but it's a huge hassle and it's just like a money suck. And so
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are just like, no way, man. I'm gonna use my feet. I'm gonna use public transportation. And then of course, the farther you get outside of New York and in the suburbs of Chicago, everybody's got a car, at least one car probably, and a lot of families have two cars.
Yeah, I'd say those systems are really similar to like, and just like in a place like Chicago, if you're in the suburbs and you definitely would have a car, but for your weekly work, if you're working downtown, you can also take the commuter rails. The Metro lines will get you, you know, into the, so you don't have to have a car on your Monday to Friday downtown. Same thing in Seoul. If you really wanted to, if you don't really enjoy parking, or if you don't want to have to pay for parking or gas or whatever, your Monday to Friday, there's commuter ways to get into town. We have a coworker who's commuting. We have mentioned a different podcast from Jack's area. Like
yeah, he takes
Sun.
he could, if he had a car, he could drive his car to this public parking area, and then you could park your car there, jump across the street, jump on the bus, and it'll take you right into express bus terminal in the center of Seoul.
Right.
And you go back
So
out, you could hop in your car. So many options, you know. It's so that's the way to do it. Let's shift gears a little bit, pun intended. Do you feel like people drive more aggressively here? I mean, is that because that's the, I mean, isn't that the kind of stereotype, right? Is like, oh, everybody drives so aggressively in Asia. And I did feel that might be true a little bit. And then I went back to the United States and I found, oh no, actually the more populated the Twin Cities has become. I'm from Minnesota. And so what, you know, people were quite aggressive and driving a lot closer behind, you know, so it was more tailgating, more less likely to let you merge, you know, this idea of like, I'm going to hold the line and no matter what, you're not merging in front of me, you will go behind me, you know, that kind of mentality, which was a change from 20 years ago when I lived in Minnesota, when it was probably less populated, you know, less congested in the.
That's interesting to hear that you're comparing, because I haven't done any driving back in the States in, well, a very long time. And because that's what I was going to say, is like, yeah, I don't like driving in Seoul because it's very congested and parking is a bitch and all of that. But I really don't like driving in Seoul just because I don't like dealing with the way the traffic moves here. Like there's a lot of it, but the way the people drive around me sucks. It's
well, people
not
will ride
fun.
your ass. I mean, they're right on your tail.
Yeah, and cutting in right in front of you
without signaling, and that's sort of, it's just especially, and taxis are the biggest culprits. Like they act like they own the roads, so they will just, they're gonna merge no matter what. Either you're gonna slow down and let them in, or there's gonna be a car accident. That's it. I mean, those are the two choices. It's binary for those guys, you know, in my experience.
Yeah, so driving in Korea, like I don't really enjoy it at all. And I did say that I don't like Korean drivers because they felt very aggressive. And I'll have to compare this to the States now. One, they felt very aggressive. Two, I often feel that drivers here just don't have a very good like spatial awareness in a lot of ways. Like they don't know where you're there and they'll just suddenly pull into your lane and it's like, oh shit, you're backing up or trying to get out of the way of them. And so driving in the cities here is just constant stress. I can't imagine being a taxi driver here.
Well, let me ask you guys
blow my
this
brains
question.
out.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, so yeah, I really don't enjoy driving here because of that. I will say for Korean people, the one thing that Korean people are amazing at driving at is they're amazing at parking and driving through very narrow areas.
Yeah,
they can take like a fucking bus and park it into like a clown car sized area.
Well, like, I think the spatial awareness thing is maybe more of a function of just how much like less space there is. Like the lanes are more narrow, and
right, parking spaces are smaller.
Yeah, and also my wife went to driving school, and also a friend of mine, his wife is Korean, and she learned to drive as an adult in her 20s, and both of the driving instructors told my wife and told his wife, don't look behind you, just use your mirrors.
Yeah.
And
I've heard
I
that.
learned the opposite. Don't
I
trust
learned
your
turning
mirrors.
backwards
You always
to
have to
reverse.
look. Well, even when you're going to change lanes, you look in
true.
your mirror, and then you look over your shoulder, and then you look in your mirror, and then you change lanes. Well, she was told only use your mirror. The mirror is, that's what it's for. And I'm like, yeah, but there's a blind spot right here both of us. So we had an argument where basically the two of us were teaming up on the two of them, saying, you have to look behind your shoulder. No, you don't. You have to use your mirror. I said, no, you have to use both. You have to look in the mirror and look behind your shoulder. I don't know. I mean, we never came to an agreement on that, but it's
I'm going to be on your side here, but we learned the same way, of course, that you turn your head. And yeah, I mean, but I do admit that I think Koreans use their mirrors better than Americans do, like reversing, going backwards, backing into a spot. I always learned I turned my head backwards and I would like back up, whereas Koreans did only use their mirrors and managed to still get into the spot quite well. So there's pros and cons, but I mean, when you're on the freeway, there's a blind spot.
Well, I think this is the thing that I work at our sister campus, like I said, in the suburbs, called Gyeonggi. And so all of the teachers that pass through there, most of us drive, like own cars and drive regularly, like every day. And so you come to this kind of inflection point as a driver here where you're like, okay, am I going to drive the way everybody else drives? Or am I just going to be like the chump that gets cut off all the time and, basically just gets abused on the road? Or am I going to, flex? And so I think a lot of us go through that stage where we start driving very aggressively and get really angry.
Do you drive pretty aggressively now?
But I went through a transformation. When I first started driving, I just became a jerk, like I'm not letting anybody in. I'm gonna hold the line at all times. I'm not going to become a sucker or a chump or anything like that on the road. And I was always at this like very, very high anxiety point all the time, where I'm just basically my baseline is just pure anxiety the whole time, and anger and rage, like road rage. And I remember somebody cut me off in just the worst way on the freeway. And I even went so far as to roll down my window, and I was like, you motherfucker, and I'm screaming out the window like a psycho, just like my kids in the back seat, and my wife, but I'm just redlining. I've lost it, and
I love that you're doing it in English too, and like
I know.
people.
It's just like I embarrassed myself. That was it. It was completely a self-own. There was nobody learned anything or got the point or the message or whatever. But I just got to a point where I was like, I can't live like that. Like, it's not good for me. It's not good for my health. And why am I even driving if this is the way I'm going to behave? And brake checking, when people are tailgating you and you tap your brake lights and that, which is again, illegal and also dangerous for you, dangerous for the person behind you.
That's
I
terrible.
mean, just all kinds of just dumb, stupid shit that I was doing on the road. And I finally just one day, I just had like kind of like a Buddhist moment or something where I was just like, you have to let all this go. Like, people cut you off. You have to find a way to like not let it eat you up inside. And it's not a personal affront, it doesn't make you weak or whatever. And so probably like 6 or 7 years ago, I just decided I'm done. I'm going to drive the speed limit at all times. I'm going to listen to the radio. I'm going to just relax. And once I made that surrender, and then people cut me off all the time, and people, tailgate me. If they tailgate me, I'll just slow down until they get so frustrated they pass me,
This reminds me of a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine. I met him here in the first year that I lived here, and we're still pretty close. And it was one of the first conversations I had with him. We were walking, so this isn't about driving, but it's the same mentality. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we were walking in Busan somewhere, and we needed to catch our train, right? So we're coming down the stairs, and the train's coming. You can hear it. They're announcing it, and it's like a tsunami of people just flowing down the stairs trying to get to the train. And my friend, I like start to pick up the pace, and he's like, "Hey, get another one." And so we had a conversation about this, and I thought this was, I think this is worth sharing. If you're coming to a big city, you don't need to join the crowd. If you're not, his point was, I will always miss the bus or the train, even if I miss it by 1 minute. I've made a decision that's not going to upset me, because I'd rather not run and look like a jackass and feel like a jackass and get bummed out if I miss it. I'd rather stand and wait 4 minutes for the next ride. And I've adopted it since then, and I've never lost it. And it's the funniest thing. Like, I don't run for public transit unless I absolutely have to.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather arrive, not early and just have a chill walk to the bus. And I think it kind of translates the same thing as driving in a busy city. You can be aggressive. You're going to be able to have, modicum of advantage by doing so. You might get to your destination. They teach you that in driver's ed, right? In driver's ed about speeding, right? If you speed, it's the cost benefit is just, it's not really there. It's like you could drive like 20% over the speed limit, but getting to your destination, how much earlier would that be? And what is the benefit of arriving that much earlier? So like my 30-minute drive commute, maybe I'm end up saving like 5 minutes at the end because I was breaking the law the whole time.
Right. And you were also, anxiety level was,
And it's something you're taught, and like I never really had to think about much because I grew up in Wisconsin, so kind of like you. For me, like when I go home, I drive every summer I go home, and I'm always driving. There's no stress. Driving is it's a relaxing affair by its nature, because there's no other
because
cars.
The next car is 100 meters ahead of you, and the one behind is 100 meters behind, and
when you pass, you wave.
It's
relaxing.
It's an amicable experience.
So if you're coming from a more rural area or whatever, and you're going to live in a big Asian city, I think what Jack is saying makes a lot of sense. Like you gotta find your zen, otherwise
you do. You're right. Yeah. This is for anyone that's going to live in a foreign country. Is you're gonna get caught up in this, like you said, the kind of why am I running down this staircase, almost where I'm practically falling down, crack my skull, and just to get to my destination a minute or two earlier. It doesn't make any sense. But if you just surrender to the groove and just be like, okay, I'm going to walk down these stairs, even if that train leaves, even if the door shuts right in my face, and that's not going to bother me, because like you said, I made a decision ahead of time that I'm done with that, stressing about those things. Your life is better. It does improve the quality of your life. I mean, you can do that in so many ways. But it's interesting to see
then when in driving how this then translates to the people around you. I'm generally these days I'm pretty chill on the road. I when I was like 17, 18, I would drive crazy fast when I was driving home. But here I try and drive generally pretty slow. I try and always have like a massive space in front of me in the car in front of me. And I'm generally pretty chill about it, except when I'm in a hurry, or sometimes when people are trying to cut in. I've been in a line to get off the freeway for like 2 kilometers waiting,
and then
slowly.
Somebody just pulls right up, and they're like,
that one asshole tries to get in right at the end. That does drive me a little bit crazy. Yeah. But it's interesting to see. I remember one time not too long ago I was driving, and it was the exact same situation where I was in this line to get off the freeway, and I remember seeing some statistics, something a long time ago, that said that if you give space in front of you, even in those long lines, people will cut in front of you, right? It's going to happen. But overall, one person even giving that space will speed up the entire lane a little bit, because that person who's cutting in, they're going to cut in anyway, right? Either they cut in front of me where I'm giving them space, or they're going to cut in 3 cars in front of me and they're just going to stop and shove their way in. Like they're getting into that lane in some way or another. So I just chill back and I'm like, okay, here's 100 meters and just go. But I remember a while ago, I was driving that and I was just cruising nice and slow. And the cars in front of me are going stopping, starting, stopping, stopping, starting, stopping, starting. And the space in front of me is getting bigger and smaller and getting smaller. But for me, I'm just like, just chilling. And the guy behind me, he's going nuts. He's just like, because the space keeps getting bigger. And he's like, oh, get up, go catch up to them. And
they're,
like,
yeah. Somebody's going to get one over on you, man. Don't let him get one over on you. You know?
Because every time a car would get in front of me, again, the car behind me would it's just like, you let another one in, you let another one in. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, they're getting in anyway. Either they get in one in front of me, they've already passed us by. They're getting in one in front of me, or they're going to get in 10 in front of me. They're going to get into the lane. And finally, at one point, the guy behind me who'd just been honking for a while, he just suddenly goes and passes me around. Like he pulls out of the lane and back into the lane just to pass me by. And I do remember at the time when he passed me by, I was almost a bit pissed. I was like, dude, like I almost wanted to not let him in again, just to piss him off even more.
Yeah.
But at the end, it was just like his reaction to my Zen. I was trying to be Zen. I wasn't completely there, but trying to be Zen. Was surprising. And that's where so many people here like still get pissed and still are angry in the road.
Well, I used to do that, you know, that was how I drove, is, you know, it was all tit for tat. Somebody cuts me off, I speed up and cut them off, you know, no signal. And then we have this big, you know, battle on the road, you know, see who can, you know, it's the most childish, immature, but I think we overestimate how many people are actually bad drivers. I think it's that like the 80-20 principle. I think it's 20% of the people kind of ruining it for the other 80 who are actually driving responsibly. And I think that rule generally applies. Probably every major city is the same. And I think that now the only thing that it might be a little bit different is that as we looked at this article, and in the article it said that Korea was 3 times more dangerous. Was that right? 3 times more deaths than per capita than the average OECD country. So, and
this is to be really clear for the listeners. This is more pedestrian deaths.
Oh, this is pedestrian death, not car accidents. You're
right. The article is talking about pedestrian deaths. It's talking about Korean drivers hitting pedestrians, and it's the pedestrian deaths caused from this article, which is interesting. So it's not accidents that are happening on this is not talking about the freeway at all, because hopefully there's no pedestrians on the freeway, but this is, you know, in streets and small neighborhoods and going through crosswalks and things like that is what this article is talking about.
And I think I have something I can contribute here as someone who likes to do long bike trips and endurance running. When I first started doing a lot of biking in the city, I felt like there was a decent amount of awareness. I didn't feel like I was getting buzzed very often compared to back home. But the truth is, I know now, it's really because as far as biking goes, you typically have a lane. There's a bike lane. And that's what drivers I think are more aware of. When you don't have a bike lane.
In Korea, you typically have a bike lane on the roads?
Yeah, like in the routes I would go on. Like,
are you talking like the offside bike path, right? Like completely off
not a
from
bike
the road.
path. I'm talking about bike lane painted on the road on the side. Like, so for me, when the routes that I'm taking are all major streets, I'm seeing you're looking confused. Like, not like
that's not
streets
common.
in my neighborhood. My streets in my neighborhood don't have bike lanes, but the connecting the neighborhoods, you will always find that there is like the path. It's like a painted red path typically. That is separate from the road, which is fantastic. But there's also like from here through Yongsan all the way up to the river, this 4K stretch from Seoul Station all the way to the Han. You've got a dedicated lane the whole way that's painted, but you're sharing that lane. You're sharing it with traffic, right? So cars can drive on it, but there should be some awareness. Anyway, my point is that I do think it is much more dangerous here. It is. Especially running, and especially running at night. I spent last summer running mostly at night because the weather was too hot and I was just doing kind of this nocturnal schedule. So I would go out around anywhere from like 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. to go running. And you would think at that time there'd be less cars and less people, and there's less, but the way people are driving is insane. Like drag racing around the mountain, around Namsan. I almost got picked off so many times. Just like going to cross the street and, there's a bend you don't see. Or even crossing crosswalks when I have a green light and cars just ripping through it. I'm talking like 80 miles an hour on that strip. That's the ridge from the Hyatt Hotel all the way down to me by the Namsan Library, that strip. And in general, I've done night runs from here to Yongsan down to the river. And when there's people or like at night, there's garbage, right, being stacked up and there's obstructions. So there's some passages on the sidewalk that are so narrow, it's just like one person, where the subway stairs go in and it's really narrow. So if somebody's coming towards me, if I'm running, I'll jump onto the street. I'm running into traffic so I can see cars coming at me. Yeah, and even then, you have to be really careful. With the cars coming at you, they will not be pulling around you necessarily.
This is the thing that this is what keeps me up at night. I have a daughter, and I don't worry about, I'm not worried about drugs at school. I'm not worried about a classmate coming in with a, fully automatic rifle they took out of their dad's, blowing teachers and students away. But the thing that really, really does scare the pants off of me is cars, her getting hit by a car, just walking across, even if the light's green or whatever, just from what I've observed, and I can't even count on one hand. It's more than 5 instances of people that I know or accidents that I've seen. Like, for example, my wife taught at a school, a mother at that school that she taught at turned the corner very quickly. The kid took a 1 step off the curb, hit the kid, killed him. So a mother at a school killed the child of another parent at that school. My university student, one of my students, when she was a kid, a bus ran over a little girl, and they had to look at this, and they saw, this grisly scene was etched in her memory forever. She was just a kid, but she's had to see this grisly scene. I was in a taxi. The guy was wearing a cast on his foot. He hit the taxi driver, hit the gas instead of the brake, and hit a pedestrian, knocked her right over. She quickly jumped up, and I think the adrenaline, when you have that, when you get hit by a car, and she jumped up and walked across the street. So she wasn't horribly injured, but it was, we had to get out of the taxi and find a new taxi, and they had to call the police and the ambulance or whatever. And I'm just like, I know an English teacher that got hit by a car. As soon as she hit her head, she started vomiting because she had a concussion. She got hit by, I think it was by a taxi driver, but I'm not sure. And another guy I know got his foot run over by a bus, and his foot essentially exploded, and so he had to, go have multiple surgeries, and he's, so this is like, this is 5 examples that I could name, and these are just at the top of my head, so there is a problem here. There's something, it's not just our imagination. It's not us being like anti-Korea or and I guess the root of my question is, what do you guys think accounts for that? Like, is it a,
well, I think the article
thing, or what?
I think the article hits it, and I think this is not only for accidents, but I think this is a lot of things. We could actually talk about this for even a bigger topic for other stuff. But the article quote says a primary reason for this is lack of enforcement. And I think that's personally, I think that's the biggest problem here when it comes to traffic things, definitely. But then again, there's other things. I think enforcement in general with laws is a problem in Korea. But let's stick to traffic for now, because there's other issues like animal abuse and things that I don't think are enforced either. But for traffic, right? So people are going through crosswalks, and there's no cop that stops them and says, you just blew through that crosswalk. There's people driving through red lights and there's no cop that stops them and says, you just blew through that red light. Like, yes, there's some traffic cameras, but if there's no traffic camera, there's no penalty effectively. Like, you're not going to get in trouble if there's not a camera there for traffic accidents.
They have outsourced essentially all traffic regulation to these cameras, to AI.
Right. And this is the one time that really pissed me off. This was a few years ago where I was to get from my home to campus, I take a bus and then a subway, and I transfer. So I take it to Samgakji Station, which, if anyone knows, it's a big intersection. That's not really important, but it's a big intersection. It's like 5 lanes in each direction, 4 ways. Like, it's a massive, really big intersection. And so I transfer from the bus to the subway. So I'm always crossing at the crosswalk and things like that. And almost every day, because I'm going at, normal like commute time in the morning and afternoon. So this is when traffic is pretty heavy. And every day there's people who push through the red lights. So the drivers are pushing through the red lights, and what happens to them is they get caught in the road, because then the light changes, and then the pedestrians start walking across at the crosswalks, and then now they're stuck in the road, and so the people going the other directions can't go because these cars are stuck in the middle of the road, right? So I see this and I'm just like, you idiots, like you're stopping in the road because you couldn't wait 2 seconds to get through, and now all the people coming in the perpendicular directions can't get through the intersections here, and that just drives me nuts, and I see it. But the time that I really got angry about this was not just the people driving and the people being assholes about it, but one time there were cops actually more than once. I've seen this at a few different occasions at the exact same intersection. There are police officers all through the intersection. There's probably like a half dozen cops there, basically, like, trying to get people through, because it's massive intersection, massive busy point of the day. And again, the people are pulling through and getting stuck and then stopping traffic from going the other direction once it changes. So what do the cops do? Well, in my opinion, the cops should ticket them. Right? You went through a red light, you're stuck in traffic, you're blocking traffic from the other direction, you're making traffic worse for everyone in a 3-mile radius from here.
Well, wait, they didn't go through a red light. They went through the green light, and then they got stuck, and then it turned red. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's a combination of both. Sometimes they actually do push through. Like, I'm sure you've seen that.
Oh,
as well.
yeah. No, that they push through
orange.
The red too. Yeah.
Sometimes it's red, sometimes it's orange. Sometimes you're right. Sometimes it is green when they start to go through, but the traffic is moving so slowly that they don't get through the light. And that's just common sense. You shouldn't go into an intersection if you're not sure you can get through the intersection, of course.
And that goes right back to that kind of aggressive, like, I can't miss it.
I gotta get through.
Yeah.
But so the cops are in the intersection, and all these cars are basically in there. And instead of the cops, like, how hard would it be for the cops to just pull out their smartphones and just take a picture of every license plate, just like, chung, 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 you were in the intersection. Obviously, you need a ticket. Just get through the intersection. Instead, they're just like, you move over here, get the cars past, and then they let them go. There's no enforcement at all. These people are breaking a very simple rule. And no one was injured because of this, fortunately, but it is costing a lot of people time, right? It's hindering a lot of people, and there's no enforcement. There's no penalty at all.
I heard a counter argument to this with an ex-girlfriend who was driving, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree with this, but her counter argument was this: it's that in situations like that, or like with speeding, she would say, not jokingly, that if there is no camera, the speed limit is infinite. It means just go. And it's a good thing because it keeps traffic freed up. So what the police can do is they can just put cameras in places where they want the speed limit to be at X, and then everybody obeys it. And like in the situation with a congested intersection, where everybody's kind of like pulling into the intersection when it's a red, when the crosswalk is lit and, going in, it's obnoxious, but the point is that it helps like the fluidity of traffic. That was her argument.
I can see that on the freeway. I very much can understand that on the freeway, but in an intersection, I don't think it holds up because, there are posted signs for speed, of course, there.
But the thing that pisses me off is that the only time I ever see like, let's say the American equivalent of what we call a state trooper, essentially. State troopers, they drive around
driving cop
roads, a driving cop, right? And they'll just set up basically set up a perimeter at the entrance of the freeway, and they just nail people for not wearing their seatbelts, and that's it. It's just they got one is the lookout, one guy's the lookout, and the second one is the writes the ticket. So basically just like, boom, got this one, you know, he sends the message, pull it over, pulled over. And that to me is like, I don't know, that bothers me. It's like lazy policing, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's like, oh, we got to meet our quota this month. So, you know, let's just set up a perimeter and nail people for seatbelts. But I do think that another counter argument would be, there is no infrastructure for pulling people over here. Like, could you imagine if they started pulling people over? People would be crashing into the you know, where are you going to pull over? You know,
that was the other thing I wanted to mention regarding, like, I do think enforcement is like what you're saying. That sounds like that could definitely be one of the biggest issues, like what the article is suggesting. But I think also there's a part of the reason you have more incidences with cars and pedestrians here is an infrastructure thing. So you're working with an extremely dense city. Okay, this is not Chicago. This is not, you know, this is a very, very densely populated place. And then you couple that with a lot of places that don't even have sidewalks. So like, right. I live in Huam Market. So downstairs is the market. There's 2 sidewalks for the main part of the market that have covered whatever, and there's vendors there or whatever. If you don't want to be in the middle of the like market time, if you don't want to be stuck like, you know, doing this, trying to get through all the people, what do? You're walking the street. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what everybody does. And then that's only for 2 blocks. And then after that, where that sidewalk is, the businesses are built out onto that line. So there is no sidewalk. And this market has buses coming up and down it. And when I'm walking just to go to like my super, just to get like, you know, a gallon of milk or whatever, you have no choice. You have to walk in the street. There's children walking in the street and buses driving in the street, like, and aggressively, and delivery drivers on scooters zipping through the street, and people walking their dogs. It's all in the more like, how do you say that? Not older, but like the more densely populated area, the less sidewalks and fluidity there seems to be. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just everybody just jumps into the street, and I think
I totally agree with you. That's 100% the problem. I don't think it's an issue that could be solved necessarily, because you're not going to be able to create more real estate without either tearing down some of those businesses and saying, you know, I mean, I don't know how you would do this. When they designed Bucheon is a city that goes in between Incheon and Seoul. Do you guys know Bucheon? Bucheon is towards the west, right? Okay, western Seoul. And when they designed that city, because it's a more recent build out, it actually has these, you know, 5 lanes of traffic with huge sidewalk areas. And so they were thinking about this when they were designing these newer cities. If you go to like a place like Dongtan is a new city. They have Dongtan 1, and then they made another one. They called it Dongtan 2, which I thought is kind of funny. I've never heard of like a city being a sequel to the original, nice. But they have that here.
I kind of like that.
It's awesome. I like it. Dongtan 2, you know, like Chicago 2. But when they designed it, you can see that they're thinking about this stuff now, you know, and it's just that like Seoul is an old city, man. It's just, you know, they just didn't, you know, they didn't think about that stuff. And again, it wasn't necessary. You know?
You see some similarities. If you're in Boston, you can see a similar thing. At least when I lived there briefly. I remember that. If you get into like the city center, older parts that haven't really been renovated or have the ability to because of the buildings that are there, you don't really have the wide sidewalks that you would in other areas.
Sure. So there must be parts of New York like that too, I imagine.
Yeah. And the so last, if you're South River, I think you get more sidewalks, wouldn't you say? Like, but even then, like some of the neighborhoods, like where our campus is, mm-hmm. That's not really great for for wide sidewalks.
If I had,
They're
you know,
pretty
if I,
narrow
my
now.
daughter were 5 years old, I'm holding her hand, you know, tightly, because there's a lot of dicey little places where you cross the street, you know, to get to Hooksuk Station, you know, get to the you know, you're crossing a street and cars have to stop and let you go through, and you kind of just have to go. And it's just kind of a, you know, I'm going to go now. Yeah. And you're hoping that the other person is going to stop. It's
like I said, it goes back to enforcement.
It's dicey, man.
What do they need to enforce? Like, who do they need to stop? Do they need, and of course it's impossible, you know, do they stop all the people who are walking through the streets? Of course that's illegal. Do they stop the people who are going really fast? That's illegal. Do they stop the people who are cutting through the crosswalks? That's illegal. There's
the
so much.
Oh, sorry. The trade-off would
No,
be
it's-
that you could make it safer, but then everybody's gonna be getting to where they're going much more slowly. Like
Which that's never going to happen in Korea.
right. I mean,
to slow the whole population down.
You'd have to slow the whole operation down to make it safer. And I just don't. It seems like every time you know, it's like you make an impression on this side, then there's a bubble on the other side, and you there's no. I don't know what the solution is necessarily. Do you guys have any, you know, suggestions?
Again, I think it comes down to enforcement, because I see this with just a lot of other laws as well, but what specifically they need to enforce is going to be the difficult thing, I think, is what we're deciding here. I would like them to enforce people going through and getting stuck in intersections. You know, like that's one for me. That's like my pet peeve. Like,
that's your
enforce that.
I'm on board with that one. In fact, I can share now a lighthearted story. This might be a good one to put in the podcast. I punched a car. Now, before you judge me on this,
We've probably all done it.
yeah, but in my defense, it wasn't completely an intentional thing. Okay, I'm running. This is up here at Namsa. I'm probably incriminating myself right now. The guy's listening to this podcast, like, I got him finally. That bald guy, son of a bitch. So yeah, people pulling into the crosswalk. I'm on the crosswalk already. I'm running. I'm not sprinting. This is a very large, wide crosswalk. You could, you know, picture this. This is like Times Square, right? We got a big width on this crosswalk, big length. I'm well into it. This guy's driving. It's a red light. He comes right in front of me, and I'm running like this. My hands, when I'm running, they're kind of already in this shape, right?
Yeah.
And I'm already swinging. So I've got two fists that are swinging. It wasn't just completely natural. I'm not going to give myself the excuse that it was like, oh, I just swung my hand into his car. I stopped. Otherwise, he would have ran over my toes. And it was just like my arm was back. My adrenaline went up because I was just shocked. Like I almost got hit by a car. I just went straight forward and I dented his car. And then I realized what I did instantly. My hand's hurting. I'm like, oh, and then I just like ran around the car, and I'm still angry. Okay, I'm not in like an apologetic mood yet. And I look back, and as I look back, he rolls down his window, and in English, he waves and goes, "Sorry, so sorry." Then I felt bad.
Then you felt bad. Yeah. Because it's, you know what? It's because when we're in our bubble, we're assuming the worst of everybody, right? The person that cut me off is doing it to emasculate me, to humiliate me on the road, and then all of a sudden, and if you were in the car with them, of course, they're just not paying attention, and they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I think, you know, how many people have died in the United States in, you know, gotten shot over road rage incidents where that was the situation, you know? It's just like your assumption is always the worst. And I mean, I think someone explained it to me like this one time, and I thought this does make sense. This theory is that we have in the United States 100 years of driving experience. I mean, if you start with like Henry Ford up until, you know, what we have now, you know, we've gotten to start with the beginning of the invention, the Model T, and, you know, we've got this I don't know what you would call experience, knowledge, wisdom that we've acquired over decades. In Korea, they essentially were like in the 80s, 70s, not everybody could afford a car, not that many people, right? In the 80s, more people were able to afford cars. And then it was just like a flood you know, so the floodgates started in like 70s, 80s, 90s. Well, we have 70 years more experience, and yet that
And Jack, to add to
technology
that,
was just
we have 70 more years of experience, and American drivers are still assholes.
yeah, right. We don't have an excuse, but I do think that there's just like,
Yeah.
I do think that if a technology is just kind of like I don't want to say dumped on top of a region, but it was kind of like very, very quickly given to them, that there is an institutional knowledge that spans a century in the United States, and it doesn't here. It's a knowledge that maybe only extends maybe 30 years or 40 years.
I think that's a very good Zen kind of thought to keep in mind, as always, is like that person who has stopped their car in the crosswalk, right? Because they were trying to push through the light and they couldn't. Like, I'm walking through the crosswalk and I want to, like, you know, kick the car because they're in my way and they're being an idiot. But I've stopped my car in the crosswalk before as well because I mistimed it. You know, shit happens. And I don't want to stop in the crosswalk, and I try not to stop in the crosswalk. I make it a conscious choice. But even though I'm aware of it, sometimes I make mistakes.
I'll give you an
as well.
example, and I think this is, I think that my theory is kind of true. It's actually not my theory. Somebody told me this, but I've countless times I've seen babies playing on the dashboard of the passenger seat. You know, basically just, you know, a baby, not, there's no car seat. It's just, you know, and I didn't see that in America when I went back. Maybe I just didn't know, I didn't recognize it. But you know, I think there is something, there is like a delayed, there's still, there's like a need to catch up or something, you know, with like the I don't know, like the gravity of the danger,
interesting,
you know, like of driving. So
agreed. And there is definitely part of that. And I still want them to ticket people who are running into the intersections. Tickets, more tickets.
You're still right. And yeah, I don't know. Did we
put the fear into some people? If you make mistakes, you're going to get a penalty of some kind, even if it's a small mistake. Yeah. And then enough people hopefully will eventually, even though you'll still have the assholes, enough, maybe you'll have maybe fewer of them.
It doesn't matter. You guys know what's going to happen. They're just going to put more cameras there everywhere. You know, I mean, that's what's going to happen. It's just every corner is going to have a camera.
If that works, I mean, that's a different issue. But if that actually gets people to, if that starts enforcing some of these simple traffic laws and people don't go through, you know, crosswalks, right? If people stop going through crosswalks because there's a traffic camera up at it, then that's a good thing, I think.
And they'll probably have those MIT robot dogs, you know, they'll be running around on the, you ever see those? You know what I'm talking about? The
not MIT though.
It's not MIT, sorry, it's the a different
Boston Dynamics.
Boston Dynamics, thank you. Yeah. And drones. So we'll have the drone cops and the robot dog cops and more cameras. So
and Demolition Man.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, I don't know. Were we too hard on Korea today, or do we? You know,
I don't think so.
We're trying to be fair and balanced, right?
Yeah, we're trying Fox to. News. But I mean, there are things that are rough here, and driving is not fun here. But then again, in big cities in the States, it's not really fun either. You know,
that it being like a Korean like problem, like it's some sort of like cultural thing or race thing. It's a big city thing. Like, if you had any,
I mean, it's not because they eat a lot of kimchi. I thought it was kimchi that makes them bad drivers.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like if you
and sarcasm, in case you didn't catch that, and sarcasm.
If you want to see, like, you know, what I think is like the crux of this problem, just go on Wikipedia, check out density, how many people per square meter. Look at the difference between here and Chicago. That'll answer a lot of these questions of like why stuff here can be a little insane sometimes.
Though, you know? I don't want to bring up another topic, but I was on Reddit, as I spend way too much of my time, and I saw a video of the freeway of zipper merging, right? Where first it's the car merging on, it's the car that's on the freeway, it's the car merging on, it's the car that's on the freeway. And that's how it's supposed to work. And Jack, at one point you said like, no, we're never going to let people on, right? So there was a video that I saw from Japan of cars, like, it was the most perfect zipper merge I've ever seen. Like, no car would go if it wasn't their turn. right? It was always like everyone took their turn the way that you should and the way that traffic works. And Japan is also crazy densely populated. And this isn't, again, I'm not pointing to Korea and saying this is a Korean problem. This is an American problem too. Americans don't like letting people in.
Kevin, you want to go on record saying that Japan's better than Korea? I think that's what his message was.
Right. Maybe next Doko's not Korean either.
Kevin is announcing.
I will say that. At zipper merging, it seems, according to this video I saw on the internet, zipper merging, yes, is better in Japan. But
they're also, they'll pick up trash and it's a different topic. That's
an entirely different topic. And so while population, I think, is a very big part of it, Ryan, I think you're very correct. I think very densely populated cities, more often you're going to see more of these types of issues. I don't think it's, a direct correlation necessarily, but I do think there's more. But you're absolutely correct. Of course.
What would be the message for our listeners out there? Maybe you don't need to drive if you live in Seoul. I would
say two things.
Yeah.
One, you don't drive if you're in Seoul, and two, the pedestrian does not have the right of way here. Be careful. Even if you have the right, even if legally you have the right of way, and I'm not sure. I think legally the pedestrian does have the right of way here. Just because you have the right of way doesn't mean you're right.
Yeah, right? I thought of this as being opposite in all Asian countries that I've been in, and I think it's for anybody traveling. If you're listening, if you're coming from the West, put this in your head. We grew up when you were a little kid. You grew up with this concept that the pedestrian has the right of way. So the truck gives way for the car gives way for the bike, the motorcycle gives way for the biker, for the jogger, for the child on the tricycle. Here, I just flip it upside down. Whatever's bigger than you, watch the hell out. And that's just sort of how it works, I think, in most countries in the East that I've been in.
Yeah, because even if you're morally right, you're still dead. So
it's just the best way to behave anyway.
So just keep that in mind. Cars are, it's dangerous out there. It can be at least dangerous out there.
All right. Well, thank you, listeners. Ryan, Kev, thanks, guys, for taking us on this nice journey here today. And
drive safe.
Drive safely out there. You guys know where to find us. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Stitcher, Spotify, all the other major platforms. We've got a YouTube channel, the Soul Patch Podcast. So you just go to YouTube and type in the Soul Patch Podcast in the search. And subscribe to the channel, like the videos. You can send us an email at thesoulpatch@gmail.com. We'd love to get an email. Soul is SEOUL. So just make sure you get the pun spelled right. thesoulpatch@gmail.com. You can visit our website where you can find everything. It's thesoulpatch.com. And I guess that's it for today. We will see you next week at the Patch. Thanks, everybody.
I'd like to pay a couple respects to the people that made me what I am today.
Nothing gear. It's all my love. It's all my love. The quiet man. It's all my love. It's all my love. Dopamine. Jim. It's all my love. It's all my love. It's all my love. The brain. It's all my love. It's all my love. Hey Bobby, let the bass go. Call me an eater, call me a dominant.